This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness. Justine Toms, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much, James. It's so good to be with you. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. That's your last name. Brian, excuse me.
You know what? People do it all the time. And that's totally fine.
Yeah, Michael Toms, he also had that same problem. Toms and Michael, yes.
Yeah, I'll take either. It's fine. So if people don't know your name just off the top of their head, you and your late husband, Michael Toms, started New Dimensions Radio back in 1973, and it continues to this day. So it's been around as long as I've been on the earth, which is really, really amazing to have that kind of longevity for this project. It started in a completely different age. I mean, this is the age of radio. And now we're in the age of doing interviews on Zoom and having self-publishing platforms like YouTube and the podcast platforms. So you've seen it all and persevered through so many changes. I just want to begin just by expressing my gratitude for all the work that you two have done over the years, because New Dimensions has been one of those companions on my own journey. And I go back, I was telling you off air that I go back and revisit interviews that Michael did with James Hillman and Robert Bly back in the 80s and 90s. And they're always, I'm always getting something new from them. And so just my gratitude for all the work that you guys have done over the years.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I would love to begin, just kind of personal interest. I would love to hear about the origin story of New Dimensions Radio. What was going on in your life, you and Michael, at that time? Where were you guys at? What was the inspiration to start this project?
Thank you for that question. I'm just reminding myself the importance of storytelling. And when I tell this story of our origins, it continues to inform me in different ways. So I thank you for the opportunity to relate this story once more, but in my new incarnation, because today I'm brand new. As of yesterday, I'm now brand new. And I want to say where I was at the time, Michael, well, first of all, Michael was head of and founder of a major mail order company. So he was a creative director, and he wrote all these copies of those things that we received in the mail about, buy this piece of property or buy this second home or whatever it was. And he was very good at it, but it wasn't his passion. That wasn't his, let's say, his sole contract for being here on the planet, I think. And and at the time, for me, when I first met Michael, I grew up with a lot of spiritual enthusiasm. And I grew up Episcopalian. And then I moved to the South. I moved from a suburb in Chicago to Alabama, where my roots were, my ancestors, my grandparents, and a lot of time I spent in Alabama all summers with all my cousins. And so I moved there permanently, and then I became a Southern Baptist. And I loved it because I loved the singing. It was so enthusiastic. If you're in a Episcopal church, it's very kind of calm singing and not a lot of energy, I would say. But the Baptists are full on. So I'd sing in the choir, and I was really good. And sometimes I would sing some solos, and people would cry when I would sing because it just got my heart moving in a great way. And then I moved to California, and of all things, I became a Jehovah's Witness. And what I loved about the witnesses was that they were very intellectual about their Bible study. So they didn't, unlike the Baptists that might cherry pick different scripture verses, they would take the whole chapter and verse and couch it in the history of the time that it was said and all of that. And I liked that approach. And I liked it that they felt like there was a way that in the future that we can all live together in peace and collaboration and community. And I love that. And then, so I felt like I was at home. I felt like, oh, this is it. This is the way, the truth, and the light, you know. And I met Michael, and we just had an immediate connection on so many levels. I was so excited to meet him. But, you know, we had some spiritual things that we had to take care of. So I phoned him and I said, Michael, I'd like to come and talk about spiritual things. And he said, sure, come on over. So he was living in a duplex townhouse at the time in Sausalito, which is the first town just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And so I came just with all of my books from the Watchtower Society and you know, coming down, and we went into his little bedroom, second bedroom, which is just floor to ceiling with books that encompass every philosophical thought. It could be Buddhism or Judaism or science of mind or the philosophies of whatever. I mean, it was just filled with all of that. And I said to Michael, okay, I want to talk about the Bible, and I want to use my translation of the Bible. And honestly, I can remember this so vividly. Michael reached back into his bookshelf and he pulled out that green New World Translation of the Bible, and he said, oh, you mean this one? Brian, it knocked my socks off. Now, I didn't say anything to him out loud, but I was thinking, I wonder if he's being more inclusive than I am. Nevertheless, all night long, we grappled with scripture. And I would say to him, well, you can see, here's the history of this, and here's what it means. I wish that I had kept the what scriptures we actually went through, but I never recorded that. But anyway, every time I would say, this is what it means, rather than saying or arguing with me in any way, he would say, I can see that, and you might look at it like this.
Mm.
And every time he said that, the fences around me, my perception kept growing and growing and growing. And that was the beginning. 9 months later, we started New Dimensions.
Huh.
And we continue with that conversation.
So it was this shared interest in spirituality, philosophy.
Exactly. Exactly. We both had a deep interest in that. And I know your wife is an astrologer, and you could probably look up our charts and you can see that philosophy and spirituality were very much a part of our maybe astrological chart for those who follow astrology. And absolutely.
Well, I think he was Gemini, no?
He was a Gemini, yes. In
Yeah.
fact, yesterday, we were doing this interview on June 8th. Yesterday was June 7th, and that was the anniversary of his
Oh,
birthday.
Yeah, I didn't even make that connection. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that explains his kind of mercurial nature, being involved in communications and wanting to, the curiosity that he displayed in his interviews, which is one of the qualities that really connects me to him, because I think that's what drives this project is my own kind of indefatigable curiosity, I never get
exactly.
tired of exploring psychology, spirituality, life.
Exactly, exactly. And in my chart, I'm a Libra, but with a Sagittarius rising, and I think that all of that really dovetails with his philosophy and his interest and his innate curiosity. Brian, he was such a master interviewer. I mean, I just am amazed when I listen to some of his interviews at the questions he comes up with and his innate curiosity and his ability, Brian, to be quiet enough that it allows the guests to come forward rather than it was. He never, and neither do I, really lists all the questions I'm going to ask. I might know the general categories that we're going to talk about with with my guest and our guest, and he did the same. He never had a list of questions, which then I find, and maybe you find this too, Brian, when you listen to people in podcasts or wherever we hear interviews, that a guest might say something, and as a listener, you're thinking, oh, that's provocative, that's interesting. I wish he would ask, or I wish she would ask such and such. But the host just goes to their next
Yeah,
question.
I know.
And it's very frustrating. So I appreciate your ability, Brian, to do deep listening and to be really aware and present for your guest. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's about being responsive. Like for me, the conversation's not alive unless I'm off script and we're actually engaging with each other and, questions are arising in my mind. And sometimes I'm the kind of the proxy audience. If I know that the person I'm speaking to has maybe mentioned something that is not general knowledge, I'll ask them to expand on that. And that's one of the things that people who listen to me seem to appreciate is that I'm asking the questions that they're asking as they're listening to the person. And you have to be spontaneous and kind of just go for it in order for that to happen, which I think is why a lot of people rely on scripted questions because it gives you a structure, you know where you're going, it's a lot safer. But to be kind of thinking and responding on your feet puts you in this, I don't know, vulnerable position maybe if you're kind of worried about, how you're coming across as a professional or as a knowledgeable person. I'd rather just be the kind of the dummy who's asking, sincere questions.
For me, I'm right with you. And for me, it's where I call spirit enters. It's I do a prayer before every interview that I might be able to do the best possible interview, that the deepest wisdom that wants to be shared is shared. So I may know some subjects that we're going to cover, but I've got to put that aside because we may not cover all of those subjects. That's not the important thing. The important thing is, as you say, is to follow the thread of the conversation, because I believe wholeheartedly that if we tap into our spiritual guides, or tap into that energy force that is supporting us, that everything that needs to be said will be said. And so to follow the conversation, even if we don't cover all the subjects, what is important is covered, and what is alive and inspiring will be covered. And that I hope our listeners will feel that as well.
Yeah, yeah, you have to be able to trust the guiding spirit of the conversation in a way. Like, I always think about the conversation as a third thing that's being created in the moment between, us two people here. And I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it wants to go or where it wants to be take us or what wants to be communicated through the dialogue. So I just have to trust, no agenda, really.
And that's the big word, isn't it? Trust. Trust as a host, and just trust in our lives that we are taking the next indicated step for the best possible outcomes, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So when you guys started this thing, did you have any background in broadcasting at all?
Not a bit. Not a bit. How we started it, we um, did a series of lectures at the First Unitarian Church in San Francisco. So we commissioned to rent a room, and we had these people come in. There were like 6 of them, and they were from all different walks of life. There was a psychologist. There was I can't even remember who all the people were, but I can't remember right now who they were, but they were different philosophies and different walks of life. And on the 4th one, and we recorded it, and at that time, the recordings were like cassette tapes. So we're talking about 1973. It was way before the internet. And so I think it was the 4th or 5th interview, not interview, but gathering, we the person that came to record it didn't show up. And there was a man who showed up with a big kind of suitcase, and it was Stephen Hill. Now, I don't know if you know who Stephen Hill is, but Stephen has been doing something called Hearts of Space, a podcast and radio series, even longer than New Dimensions. And so Stephen showed up for the lecture, and he asked us, he said, "Do you mind if I tape this? I just got this new Nagra tape recorder, and I would like to tape it if you don't mind."
How serendipitous.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you don't believe in fate, really? Come on.
I mean, who's orchestrating this? Certainly not us. And so afterwards, we went to dinner. I think it was to a local Denny's that was open all night, and we spent hours together. And another man was with Stephen, and his last name was Alexander. I can't remember his first name at the moment, but he at that time was doing a radio program on KQED, which is the largest public station in the Bay Area. And their broadcast would go out to all of Northern California. It was huge. And he said, I've been doing these interviews every other week, but I'm not going to be doing them anymore. Would you consider taking them over? And of course, we said yes. Michael said yes. And so we started doing an interview series on KQED. I think it was a half an hour every other week. And then pretty soon it was an hour every week. And then pretty soon it was 4 hours live every Saturday night.
Oh, wow.
And for like about 5 years, it was an institution.
Four,
And
4 hours. Would that be 4 hours with the same guest?
sometimes,
Uh-huh.
sometimes, I mean, I'm just digitizing and describing the 4-hour program we did with astronaut Rusty Schweikert. You know, it was just wonderful, wonderful. And this was back in the 70s, you know, and he was the first one who really described seeing planet Earth from space. And he was one of the Apollo astronauts that traveled around the moon. He didn't walk on the moon, but he did that. And then I can remember another one, Fridtjof Capra, the physicist, and that was a 4-hour live program.
Wow.
And it changed and we would have call-ins. And Brian, the people who called in were just as informed and enlivened and good with their questions as any host would be. There were no crank calls or anything. We were all together in this circle of inquiry and curiosity and excitement. And we would just do this. Sometimes we would also have, I think Joseph Campbell was one that would be 4 hours long. But sometimes we would have multiple guests. And sometimes we would have gone and taken our cassette player and interviewed all these people offsite and bring those interviews. And then we would incorporate in the conversation with these 4 hours these other people and have the guests comment on their
that's great.
contribution. It was just a magical time. And Stephen Hill was our engineer, and he would come and he would haul in bins full of LP long playing records. And so when we'd have a break, he would do the music. And oh, I learned so much about music from Stephen Hill and what his contribution was at the time. Those were magical years, magical years.
What a time. Okay, so now with the advent of podcast technology, you know, one of the things that people have been talking about is like, wow, the medium of long form conversations, like Joe Rogan doing these 3-hour interviews. You guys were doing it back in the 70s on live radio where people were listening live and calling in and contributing to the show. Like that is, that's groundbreaking, I'd say. Because I think people are so used to watching pre-recorded broadcasts that were often edited for time to fit on TV or whatnot. But yeah, to have that on the radio live just must have been so exciting. And then I guess for you guys to know that you're reaching people and that people were really listening and engaged and willing to come on the radio and ask their questions live, that must have been kind of exciting as well, yeah?
Oh, for sure. For sure. We just looked forward what we would do, that we had a team of people, and I have to say, out of that team of people in those early years, 2 of them are still on the team. So that's amazing to have the longevity of myself, Dan Drayson, and Lou Judson on the team. There are only 4 of us really on the team. And we include Lou Judson's wife now, Colleen, and of course Travis Glenn Sabera, who is the extra host. And let's see, I lost my train of thought. Well, the history of New Dimensions and these people who have been with us all that time hold that history with us. And that's what's so amazing and important as we all hold. You know, when you have an older friend who's been with you along the way of your long journey into your life, that's very, very precious as we hold each other in our histories and also in our genius, because that's kind of a Gene Houston sort of thought that we're all geniuses. And when we have a long-term friendship or long-term relationship, we we go up and down. Like we might get depressed and we might fall out and we might lose confidence in ourselves. However, those friends of ours will continue to hold us and know that we are more than that momentary dip in our physiology or in our psychology or whatever you want to call it. That those are just dips because we really are geniuses. We really are. If we can remain curious, then we're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The way I think of it, I like to think that I have a genius or a daimon that is prodding me along, and has its own agenda. Like I love James Hillman's idea that, well, that he got from the ancient Greeks, the Platonists, that the daimon holds your soul's code. That you've chosen your fate, but you forget it upon birth, and it's the daimon who retains that information and acts as a guiding or tutelary spirit along the way. So I make no claim on my creativity or curiosity. I just say, it's the daimon. I can't help it. If I know what happens if I go against the daimon, he sends me usually into a deep depression or something, you know.
Exactly. You know, Brian, that I just did an interview. I think it was I get them all confused, but I think recently I did a new interview with Mark Nepo about language. And he mentioned that specifically, the Greek philosophy of the daimon. And then he also dissected the word that as it went through time and it changed and went through different iterations, it got divided into demon and angel. So it got separated. So we have a demon on our shoulder or an angel. But in fact, the daimon, if I remember correctly, what he was saying about the original was that it was offering us not only information or helping guide us, it also challenged us. And that challenge was a good thing because then we could grow. And that's not a demon.
Yeah.
That's part of what we need for our own physical growth and psychological and spiritual growth.
Yeah, Socrates said of his daimon that it only told him no. Like it was like a negative guidance always. And so he would, and I think we can relate to this. Like you kind of can start to get a gut feeling that, maybe I think I should interview this person, and it gets closer to the day, and you go, I just don't think it's a good fit, or it's not right for my show. But there's something in you that just says, no, I don't think so, even if it makes sense on, some other kind of rational level. There's just this like gut feeling that speaks to you, to do or to not to do. But I definitely am getting in touch with that no more and more as I grow older.
And I think as you get in touch with that no, I encourage you to, and encourage all of us to go deeper. What is that no? Is that no helping me to grow? Is
Hmm.
that no, will it expand my lens of perception? Is that no something that I need to know so that I can get to a yes? So to not just automatically
Yeah.
say, oh, it's a no, and then I'm going to throw it away.
Yeah, no, I think you have to develop a relationship to whatever we call it, your intuition or your daimon, because you're right. Like sometimes the reactive no can be coming from a place of constriction or fear. It could be keeping us kind of in our safe little comfort zone. But what I find is that when I really feel that daimonic urge to step into a new territory or to expand in some way, it's always accompanied by a feeling of fear or discomfort or nervousness. Of course, because I'm expanding. I'm going, into a new territory. I'm becoming more than I was before. So that's always going to be a kind of a scary and uncomfortable place. And so that to me is part of, it fits into like my growing discernment over the demonic urge. It's like, okay, like you said, is this no keeping me safe? Is it keeping me comfortable? Is it keeping me kind of constricted? Or is the no coming from like, oh my God, I don't really want to go there. Do I really have to do that? And then the daimon goes, yep, sorry, pal.
Yeah, if I do it, I might change. It
Yeah.
might change something basically in me, or it might change my perspective. And the ego wants to protect us and wants to keep us safe, and wants us to travel along as we always have. And so it's hard. It's hard to buck the ego, and it's hard to say yes when we feel like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And I'm facing that right now. I have a new book on my desk, and I've been talking to the, let's see, here it is. I've been talking to the publicist, and it's
Oh,
called Love,
love
Love
conquers fear.
Conquers Fear. And it's all about humanity, AI, and the age of abundance. And, I wasn't sure. I thought, oh God, and it's huge. I mean, it's huge. You can see it's really huge.
It's a lot of
And,
homework.
I mean, I'm always doing homework. I'm always in school because, and each time I do an interview, I read the entire
Yeah.
book. I mean, I don't depend on summaries or things like that. I might, let me check in with that. But it's my own intuition as I go through a book and start to read it. I'll start to make connections
Hmm.
that only I can make because of my unique life.
Hmm.
And I know what, and I see, oh, this interests me.
Hmm.
Well, if it interests me, if I read something and it really lights me up,
Hmm.
then I write that down. I take a note right then and there about that book. I put it into a file, a Microsoft Word piece,
Yeah.
and called Notes on the Book. And I know that I need to cover that as a subject because it lit me up.
Yep. 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 It's the same for me too. If I'm like sometimes it goes both ways for me. Like so many of the people who I meet on this podcast are because I'm exploring a certain area. And then I'll come across some writers or thinkers related to that subject. And if they're still alive, I'm going to reach out to them because I want to speak to them. And then when I'm reading a work, like you said, very similar, I think. If questions start to pop up in my mind, like if that curiosity is kind of activated, that tells me, okay, this is going to be good. And those, yeah, just like you, I've always got like a kind of not a Word document. I have like a note-taking app that I use, and just writing down those questions, and those are there, but I'm not always referencing them as I'm having the conversation. It's like they're just in there already, and some part of me thinks, well, I should write this down, but the questions are already kind of stored away, ready to go. So I don't really
It's
worry too much about that.
it's true. It's true. My process is so similar.
Hmm. Okay, this is really fun for me because it's kind of turning into a little bit of inside baseball. Like what, and I'm getting to kind of pick your brain on, you know, all of the work that you've done interviewing and all of that. One aspect that I wanted to ask you about, because over the decades, you guys have had some really incredible guests on. You've had Nobel laureates, Pulitzer Prize winners, the Dalai Lama, these great like spiritual figures. In the beginning, how did you start to get these kind of like high tier guests? Um, how was that process work? Did you have like a kind of a PR agent working for you guys, or was it difficult in the beginning to get the more well-known guests?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I must say we were in the right place at the right time. So you go back to the 70s, and we had no PR agent or anything. We are our own producers. And so we go back to the 70s, and the Bay Area was a concentration of consciousness research, let's say. I mean, people came through the Bay Area, all the gurus that came from, the East, from India and so forth, and then philosophers, all of them came through the Bay Area and were presenting in the Bay Area. And we were the only outlet at the time, really having the wherewithal, having the KQED sort of imprimatur behind us that we could broadcast in a broad way, and we developed a reputation. So it was fairly easy when we would see somebody's coming into town, let's say Ram Dass or Allen Ginsberg or whoever it might be. So we would just reach out to them, and they would say yes, and they would come on. So it was kind of being in the right place at the right time. And then later on, when KQED started to realize they had a radio station. In fact, they weren't paying attention. They were mostly paying attention to their TV side. And so they weren't paying attention to radio. But we were kind of proving that radio could be a great medium for them for fundraising. So it wasn't after about 6 years, I believe, they actually took us off the air. That was pretty devastating. We lost a lot in that moment because they took over their own airwaves. And I mean, at that time when we were doing KQED, we had keys to their office because it was Saturday, and we'd open up their offices and we'd bring in all of our team and go to their little small studio. And people like I can somehow the name Gaskin, Stephen Gaskin. I remember when he came in with his whole entourage, or others that would come in, and KQED then realized that they could do a lot of fundraising with their radio station, and we lost that. But then, again, we were talking about spirit-driven. There was a public conference by NPR. National Public Radio was doing their public conference I think it was in Kansas City. And Barbara Marks Hubbard at the time was on our board of directors, and she gave us a $5,000 grant to go to that conference. So Michael and our engineer, Phil Catalvo, went. And at that conference, we went prepared with 52 already produced 1-hour programs. And we offered them to stations. Well, that was the time when uploads and downloads were just starting. They were just starting to use the satellite stuff, and stations were all excited to work with this new technology. But they hadn't planned on the content they would produce on this new technology. Well, New Dimensions came in, and out of that conference, we got 100 stations, public radio stations, to sign on to air New Dimensions. And that was the start of our being able to produce, in a wide arc.
Right. So you had like a year's worth of weekly hour-long programs in the can. Now, were those things that had aired live already, or were those things
Yeah,
that you had already?
they actually didn't air live, but there was another station that even when we're on KQED, we're also producing radio for KPFA, which was a local Berkeley station, and then another station called KSAN, KSAN. And so out of the KSAN, we had been producing these programs. They were pre-produced. They weren't live programs, but they were 1 hour, And so those were already there. We had
Hmm.
already aired them on a local station. So we just revamped them for broadcast across the US.
Hmm. And in those first years, did you guys have day jobs? Or are you making a living from New Dimensions?
That was a great question. That's always the hard part about it. We let me Michael, what Michael did to support us, to support New Dimensions and to support us, to pay the rent, so to speak, was he did something called successful marketing techniques for the nonprofit organization. And he did these all over the US. 5,000 nonprofit organizations came to these trainings. And
Hmm.
this harkens back to his. Remember, I said that he
Yeah,
had an
mail order marketing guy.
mail order, right? And so he really had this creative way of talking about how nonprofits could earn a living and do what they do without sacrificing their principles. And
Huh.
so that actually supported New Dimensions financially for quite a few years. And then
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I had a first career before I started teaching yoga and doing counseling. My first career was as a graphic designer in marketing and advertising. And when I transitioned, I of course had the skills to, make my own business cards and postcards and websites and things like that. And I, design and publish my own books, uh, edit my own videos, all that stuff. Like all those skills that I learned in the, 15 years previous of being a graphic designer at the dawn of the internet. And now I could put to good use. And now I'd say now I use my power, my marketing powers for good, not evil. Not for selling running shoes and SUVs. And it sounds like Michael did the same thing. He took what the skills that he had learned in his previous occupation and put them to good use in a vocation. Helping nonprofits out and probably helping New Dimensions grow as well.
it's true. And I'm just reminded as you're saying that, Brian, that in nature, nothing is wasted.
Yeah, right.
Nature wastes nothing. It's all part of the growth of its own survival and its own good good ways and
Flourishing. Hmm.
flourishing
Hmm.
exactly. And so in that way, nothing is wasted. That our skills are then redone to provide another service, but the skills are there and needed. And I'm thinking Michael and I co-wrote a book called True Work: Doing What You Love and Loving What You Do. And it's all about that marketing in some ways and how to really live your purpose and to live it fully and fully embody it and be supported by it and not to be afraid of the marketing part. You know, that I think it's really emboldened to people who are starting something to not give away their marketing to some agency. That it's I think it's really important to understand the marketing and only you know what you know and what you can give to others, and only you know really exactly how to talk about that and how to present that. And once you do that, you might then give it away to someone else, but you've got to do that first.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
my opinion, you
You've got
got
to
to
give
know
them the
it.
vision because you know yourself the best. You know what you're passionate about doing. You know who your kind of ideal clientele is better than any marketer. And, with my background, I can tell right off the bat when somebody, whether it's a podcaster or a speaker or a therapist, has gone to some marketing professional or to some AI marketing site when I feel like I'm looking at a template, not a person.
Exactly.
And I said, God, what a missed opportunity there for you to communicate to me who you are and what makes you remarkable.
Exactly. I'm just getting inundated with that kind of AI. They pull out some program that we've done and then they mention it like, we know you've done
Yeah.
interviews with blah, blah, blah about
Yes.
this subject. Now, here is a
Yeah.
person. And
I
I,
know to demonstrate familiarity, but I'm so glad we're talking about this. This is real inside baseball stuff because every day I get these AI generated solicitations for people to be a guest on my podcast. And it's like, well, in some sense, I'm flattered because, well, you know, you've made it when even the AI plucks you out and says, this would be a good opportunity for so and so to sell their book or their coaching program. But I'm immediately turned off when I can tell that it's been AI generated because, like you said, the markers are there. It's like I'm going to come right out of the gate and pretend like I've actually listened to some of your podcasts and that I know what you're about and that you're a really like a hand-picked good match for my, my client or
right,
myself, right?
exactly. Well, I know that one of the interviews that we recently did, and this is Travis Glenn just did it last Friday with Shannon Algeo, I think his name is, and he wrote a book. I have it on the desk, The Power in Your Hands, and it's all about technology. And one of the things he said on the interview is we need to rehumanize digital environments.
Hmm.
And I wrote down that phrase because I thought, yes, that's what we're looking for. And we're looking for the need for robust communities and for us to really work in collaboration, even though we're not face to face, to figure out true communication, true one-on-one communication, and not just fall into that trap of AI generated stuff. I mean, there's some good things about AI. I mean, I'll use some of it. I'll use help in my writing to really refine something that I'm writing, but I will write it myself. I don't depend on AI to write it. I will generate the writing, and then I might ask AI to correct the grammar or whatever it is, and it might do some editing, but I don't always accept their edit
Hmm.
because it's if it takes away from the genuineness of my
Your
writing and
voice,
what I'm
yeah.
saying,
Hmm.
I reject that part.
Hmm. Well, I mean, the only thing I really use AI for is doing transcriptions of these long form interviews. And for that, I'm really grateful. Of course, they often do a really terrible job, and the amount of work that you have to do to correct and edit it because it doesn't
Oh,
understand
absolutely.
idiom and accent and things like that, so it gets a lot wrong. But it can save me from typing, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of words out. Yeah, it has its place, but I'm so with the author Shannon Algeo, I think it was, or something, about rehumanizing digital spaces. And that's something I've really been working to figure out, like, how do we do that? And what does that mean? And in my own little way here on this podcast, I've demonetized it from YouTube because I was getting so tired of these AI generated ads interrupting these really beautiful human conversations. It felt started to feel so jarring to me, and I had like a real negative aesthetic response to it. I just said, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to trust that people who appreciate this podcast are going to support it. And so I have a Patreon that's private and people can kind of enter into that. And I feel it's like a more kind of humane, enclosed space where we can keep out all of the kind of the marketing and big corporate messaging and all of that stuff and the algorithms. It's a lot more organic. And also, not editing the heck out of the conversations. Like I listen to some podcasts now, and you can tell that they've had some AI editor go in and remove every little pause, every breath, every and ah, as if those things are what? Undesirable, unacceptable. But those are the kind of the fingerprints of the human in conversation. When we're searching for a word, or we make a mistake, we fumble a word or whatever it is, that's what makes us human. You know, we're living fallible, imperfect beings who are like struggling to make sense of things and to communicate ideas. Especially when we're thinking on our feet and we're being spontaneous and not just reciting scripts to each other.
Well, exactly. I can think of a particular moment when Michael was interviewing Marion Woodman, who is a Jungian psychologist, and
A Canadian
yeah,
icon, yes,
that's
I'd say.
right. She was Canadian, absolutely. And there was a moment, and about halfway into the interview, where there was a pause. Somehow he had asked a question, she had answered it, and there was a pause. And normally you would fill in as a host that pause
Right.
with another
Dead.
question or
The worst
whatever.
thing in radio is dead air, right? Wasn't that the
Yes,
old maxim?
exactly. And so, but Michael just intuited that there was something more that wanted to be said. And he just shut his mouth, didn't say anything. And it seemed like a
Resisted the urge to fill the space. Yeah.
exactly. And then she came out with this most extraordinary story of being healed in India by a woman who would sit next to her.
Oh, the Black Madonna Kali healing that she got on a bench. That's one of my favorite stories. I've listened to that so many times I can't tell you, and every time I find it so moving that this large dark woman would just and Marion was like in the throes of death, suffering from some disease that she picked up in India, and this woman would just sit next to her, just barely touching her, and she felt that there was like this healing transference that this woman was giving her without doing anything demonstrative or just sitting next to her. And yeah, I love that story. I'm so glad you reminded me of that.
Yes, it was a magical moment in New Dimensions. And it was like AI would have closed that up or done something, and that would have never happened, you know. And I'm also thinking there was another program that we did, and somehow I can't remember which program it was, but somehow Michael just burst out into raucous laughter, and it just spontaneous. And later on, Bernie Siegel, the doctor Bernie Siegel, pulled that laughter. He did a whole, I guess, recording of different laughters, and he
Like laughter
included that.
therapy kind of thing.
Yeah, laughter therapy, and
And
it
Michael's
was.
made the cut.
And Michael made the cut, right? So that was really very, very special. But we're talking about AI and how it can be in when it does interrupt, let's say, a podcast with well, we're talking about YouTube and the interruptions that can be there. I'm just wondering, we have a YouTube channel called New Dimensions Cafe, and so we actually do a video recording of the cafes, which is a shorter form of the long 1 hour audio only broadcasts that we do or program series that we do. And in the cafe, which runs maybe from 15 to 20 minutes, it varies in length. I don't think it's interrupted with ads, but now I'm curious to look that up to make sure it's not interrupted with ads. So I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, you actually have to take an extra step to demonetize or to turn off advertising because by default they want to be able to show ads on your channel. And what I've
Oh,
noticed since I
go
did that
ahead.
a few months ago, I kind of felt like I was taking a stand, right? And I was taking a financial hit because I was getting ad revenue from my videos. But what I noticed actually is that my videos get far less reach now that I don't allow advertising on them. So, I mean, I don't think people understand just what kind of racket is going on behind the scenes, you know. And like what we're up against as independent producers, we're trying to do something that's more meaningful than just commenting on the latest movie or something like that, you know?
Right, exactly. And it's all about algorithms, and they're looking how to get our attention. And we've done some many interviews about the attention deficit that we're all encountering now, because it's just grabbing our attention in so many ways. And that is why independent media like what you are doing is so important, Brian, that we keep doing it no matter what,
Mm.
because there are forces that are trying to eliminate that and just turn everything into a commodity. Like our attention has been turned into a commodity.
Yeah. Yeah. My bumper sticker about AI, and maybe people who are regular listeners have heard me say this a few times, but I think it bears repeating. But my bumper sticker is that every time we outsource our creativity and thinking to AI, we give away a piece of our soul. And I really strongly believe that. And just to say too that what's happened, what I've been noticing happen is that the algorithms are now shaping the way people create content. You can see over the years how it's changed, where people have started using the same type of thumbnails with some crazy expression on the face and some I don't know, some provocative statement with exclamation points, just trying to grab people's attention. And people who I think formerly had a lot of integrity, when I see them start to play to the algorithm like that, it just, my
Oh,
heart just kind of drops, you know? It's like, God, we lost another one to the algorithm. So I'm like steadfastly resisting all of that stuff.
that just reminds me of, maybe it's another subject, so to speak, but it's when I'm interviewing someone who, let's say, they've been on the circuit of
Yeah.
podcasts and interviews, and
And they
so
come with the monologue.
yeah, they've got their scripted thing, and so I ask them their first question, and I can feel, okay, they've said this 1,000 times, and I don't feel their presence.
Yeah.
And so what is beholding to me is to help them understand I am really here with them, and I want something authentic from them, not just their script that they've
Hmm.
said 1,000,000 times or 1,000 times. And that's, I know you're what you go for exactly the same, is that to get people off their scripts. And that's important, because when we can authentically be with one another and follow one another and respect one another and be curious about one another, then something magical can happen.
Well, here's maybe where I could seek some mentorship because that has certainly happened to me. Thankfully, the vast majority of people who I'm interested in speaking to are showing up for that exact same thing. They want an opportunity to maybe explore other facets of their work that they don't normally get a chance to, or maybe even generate new ideas in the moment through the dialogue. But every once in a while, and it's usually one of those people who, a PR agent has reached out to me and said, so and so would be great. And maybe they're a big name, so I go, okay. But sometimes what's happened is I'll ask that opening question and I'll get like a 20, 30-minute monologue. And I'm sitting there just kind of like, I don't know, I feel like the energy leaking out of me as I say it to my wife. I say, "Oh, I just got an ear beating from this guy who just wouldn't stop talking, wouldn't even like leave a pause for me to, ask another question." Now, Do you have like a skillful means for interrupting that or helping to communicate to the person that you'd like them to be present and
I wish I did, Brian. I wish I did. It's just always in the moment, and it's an energetic thing that I do when I feel them on the script and what my next question might be after they've kind of wrapped out their idea, their philosophy. I will ask something. I depend on spirit to help me ask that question is all I
mm,
can say. I ask my guides, okay, help me out here. And then I follow the intuition of whatever kind of shows up, and it's surprising in all the different ways. And I can remember, and I just tried to look it up, that what Fritjof Capra, the physicist, said about new dimensions, and it was something about how he was changed by the interview,
mm,
and that when that happens, that's magical. Magical in the best sense of the word magic, because it's unscripted, it's unrehearsed, it's just it just takes us to a whole deeper level of being together in
mm.
conversation. So all I can say to you, Brian, is maybe you know, when it's happening and you intuit it's happening, you know, just silently make a prayer to spirit and to your guides and to your deep intuition where to go to open it up to the kind of depth that you are looking for, and your listeners and your guests too,
Hmm.
surprisingly.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice because I think, sometimes what my response is that my kind of my open-hearted curiosity starts to close up when I feel like I'm being just monologued to. And so I think if I'm aware of that and just thinking about, hearing your voice in that moment and going, okay, just try to stay open, let something come through that is going to steer this conversation toward the more genuine, the more flowing, right? All of those things. Yeah.
So it's not like some written sort of cue
Yeah.
you have for yourself. If this happens, always ask this,
Yeah.
or, don't, maybe that's
Those
because
things.
every situation is unique.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that comes up in therapy and counseling training a lot too. People will be looking for these, little special questions to ask or interjections. And it's like you just gotta like trust your heart. You gotta trust that spirit that's in the room with you, guiding the whole thing along. Yeah, it's so much. I think like, what I do when I'm having conversations with people is so much like what I do when I'm having conversations in the therapy with people. It's always about, I think, trying to open a space to that. Carl Jung recognized this, that in when therapy is really working, there's a third thing that enters and changes actually both in this case, the therapist and the client. But I think it relates to what you just said too with Fritjof Capra, that he felt changed by the experience, probably as you and Michael also felt changed by the
Oh,
experience.
absolutely, absolutely. And what you're talking about is a practice of deep listening.
Hmm.
And this is, I do a lot of circle work and have for many decades. And in circle work, it's always about deep listening and witnessing another. And I have learned through my experience of circle that when I have felt truly heard, truly witnessed, then I am changed. I remember one time when Michael and I were going through a real hard time financially. In fact, we had gone through bankruptcy. We had lost our house for just, it went up for auction. It was just a terrible time. And so we did a circle. We had a circle which we had been part of for many decades. So they knew who I was, they knew who Michael was, they knew our genius. And it was an all-night circle. And all night, usually this doesn't happen, but this time I spent all night complaining and berating Michael. I mean, I was laying it on like how mad I was that we were in this situation and how it occurred and blah 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 and all night long. And then in the morning we're at the breakfast table and I'm still complaining. And the circle, the people in the circle never said a word to me. They just received it, including Michael. I mean, Michael didn't defend himself. He didn't step in and say, oh, Justine, I didn't mean that, or I'm sorry, or whatever. Nothing. All they did was receive me completely. And by the end of breakfast, honestly, this is the truth. I was healed. I did not feel any animosity. I was not upset. It all disappeared. And I believe that that was because I was deeply witnessed and received without judgment and without trying to fix me.
Or
And
without
that's
defending. Hmm.
not defending or anything. And that was like, that's that deep listening that is absolutely healing. It works, and that's why therapy, when therapy is really really good, it's because the person, the client, has felt truly witnessed in all of their angst and all their whatever it is they're going through, or anger or disappointment or grief or whatever it is. If that is truly deeply deeply witnessed without judgment and without trying to fix them, something magically happens and there is healing present.
Yeah. Yeah, it's making me think about back to the Greeks again, and the role of theater as a group therapy. And they called that release, that emotional psychological release, catharsis, which is like a purging or a purification. And they understood the value of that, in that in order to keep a community or a society healthy, they had to have an outlet where people could come and have that experience of catharsis. And I think that's why they didn't need, one-to-one psychotherapy. It's because they had this
Yeah,
incredible group therapy of the theater.
exactly
And it
that.
sounds like that's the medicine that you got, and you just had to kind of like get it all out, right? Purge it.
Right, right. And but not only get it out, but have it
But
received by
right,
another.
right. Not just screaming at the clouds or something like that, or
No,
sticking your
that's
head in
not
a
going to do
hole
it.
and screaming. It has to be witnessed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which also reminds me, my next interview, which comes up this Friday, is with Phil Cousineau again. I love Phil. He's into mythology, and I've interviewed him many times, and he's just a wonderful person. I know you mentioned Inside Baseball. One of our early interviews with him was about sports and baseball in particular. But anyway, this new interview is called The Wisdom of the Odyssey.
Hmm.
And this is almost a 3,000-year-old epic poem by Homer. And so I'm right in the middle of researching all of
Oh,
the, it's
yeah.
just amazing. So going back to the Greeks and just what you said, that this was performed all over the Mediterranean, 2,700 years ago. And it was for that, the healing of the wounded, excuse me, the wounded warrior.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, inside baseball, tell Phil to give me a shout. I've been trying to reach him about coming on the show because I've got a copy of The Odyssey on my nightstand right now. I've been doing the research, and when I found out that his new book was on The Odyssey, I said, okay, now's the time to get Phil on because I've had his little book on soul on the bookshelf for years. He's just been one of those people that's been on my list. Like that's, he's another like soul figure that I love to talk to on this show.
Excellent. When I'm with him on Friday, I will definitely
Prod him, yeah.
pitch Brian James and that he must come on your podcast, and I'll send him a connection to you and so forth, and you to him. So I'll make that happen. That's
Thanks.
even that in itself is spirit driven. Do you feel it? Do you feel our guides just sort of saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, Phil should be on Brian's show"? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I do appreciate that because I think there can be so much competition in people who are, kind of in overlapping areas or treading on the same ground. And I think it's just, if we appreciate a set of ideas or a particular thinker or a book, it's like, I just want to help amplify that more and more. And I've got my own little corner of the internet, and you've got yours. And so let's just share notes or share
Oh,
contacts, you
absolutely.
know?
The more the merrier.
Yeah.
We need all these
I
voices.
know we need
Absolutely.
all hands on deck.
Yes, or everybody on the playing field, not just passively sitting on the grandstands. And,
Well,
I'm reminded,
yeah.
this just reminds me that I feel we're in a time in history that is very akin to the transmorphic, whatever, so the caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
Hmm.
And when you look at that whole way that happens, the caterpillar goes into a cocoon. And what amazes me is that it has to totally liquefy.
Hmm.
And
So crazy.
that just like blows my mind.
I
And then
know.
after that, there are these cells. They're called imaginal, they've been named imaginal cells. And they start to form. And at first, the caterpillar rejects all those cells, but enough of them start to coalesce. And when
Oh,
that
I love this.
happens, that's when the butterfly starts to form. And I feel that we're in that particular time culturally.
Oh yeah,
We're
things are
in
breaking
that,
down for sure.
yeah, breaking down, we're liquefying.
Hmm.
All institutions, everything is up for grabs. So this is the liquefying part. So it's beholden to us, to you, to me, to other podcasters and other writers and other, however we transmit our wisdom and our interviews or whatever it is, that we are part of those imaginal cells and we are gathering. So this is why it's not competition.
Yeah.
It's
Collaboration.
coalitions, it's
Coalition.
collaborations, and that's what's going to change things for the better.
I totally love that. I've got a kind of rebellious revolutionary mindset. So as soon as you mentioned that those cells that are needed to reform, reconstitute all of that matter into the form of the butterfly, that they're called imaginal cells, like that they hold the image of the butterfly in them, and that a certain amount of them are needed to overcome the resistance from maybe the caterpillar form, the old form. Imaginal cells of revolution is what we need. And
Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm going to write that down.
I know we got to make that into something.
Yeah, I'm a imaginal cell for revolution.
Hmm.
I have a bumper sticker that I call I'm part of We the People party is, but I like this one better. I'm a an imaginal cell for revolution, or maybe not the word revolution, for a better world or something, you know. So it's
Yeah.
more than just revolting against something, it's going for something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a reconstitution or James Hillman loved the word revisioning, you know,
Revisioning. I like, yeah,
something like that.
revisioning a better world. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna work on that, but
Yeah.
I
Let's
really,
work on that. Let me know what you
I'll,
come up with. Yeah.
yeah, well, you work on it too, but I can
I
design the
will.
t-shirts and the pins, and the bumper
Yes. Yes.
stickers.
Yes. Yes.
And I
And
love
then
that
we're putting out that word imaginal cell, and
yeah,
that might create some curiosity. What's an imaginal cell?
yeah, and then it's got this incredibly inspiring story of the transformation from caterpillar to
Exactly.
butterfly, right? And I love that it the what it leads to is the butterfly, which was the old image for the psyche or the soul,
That's right.
going back to the ancient Greeks. And
That's right.
one of the things I've been calling myself these past number of years is a soul activist, like really trying to activate soul in people, to resist this, algorithmification of the human being, like, that Wendell Berry quote about there's going to come a time in history where there's going to be a choice to be made between those who want to become machines and those who want to live as creatures.
Oh, that's a wonderful quote. That's a
So good.
wonderful quote. We've interviewed him several times, and he's quite amazing. And I'm going to look that up.
Yeah. I've got it it's at the end of all my videos now on YouTube.
Wonderful.
Yeah, because I feel like that's the time we're at where we all have to make an active choice to either give our souls up to the machine or to kind of persist in our humanity, and keep
Yes.
evolving as humans,
Yes. Yes.
as
And
creatures
yeah,
of this
as
earth.
creatures, and yeah, I just had to turn down a proposal from someone I totally respect in deep ways and have been interviewed many times, a spiritual teacher. And it was all about AI and having AI take them past wisdom masters, from, let's say,
Right.
Socrates or whoever it might
And
be,
turning them into an AI bot.
and turning them into an AI and saying and interviewing them.
Right. You could consult Socrates or you could consult
Yes,
Jesus or yeah.
yes, yes, exactly. And I had to turn the project down as far as collaborating with it because I don't feel at this point that we have the guidelines for what Wendell Berry is calling, being a machine or a creature. We don't have the guidelines to humanize and to avoid the harm that AI can
Hmm.
do and is doing. I mean, it's adding something. I'm not saying that, and I don't think that we can just quit it altogether. It's out there. It's
Yeah.
there. It's not going to change. But if it's like the Industrial Revolution, where the steam engine came in and it changed so much, it's we're at that kind of inflection point.
Hmm.
If it's going to change us, let's have it change us for the better and not be harmful to humankind or the environment.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think, it asks of us, discernment and agency. So not
Agency.
just letting it do anything actually, but guiding this, like using a like conscious use of a technology for the betterment of not humanity, but the way we humans live in this world, So like let's put up guardrails on an AI and have it just concentrate on figuring out finally some like better treatment for cancer or some better renewable energy source, right? Let's just not let it run amok
Hmm.
and kind of like let it infiltrate every aspect of our lives.
Exactly.
That's me. Just like resist so that you actually have a choice in the matter, right?
Yes.
That you're acting with
Resist
some
and
agency,
take your agency. Absolutely. I love that.
intentionality, right? Like
Yes.
what's this for?
Yes.
Okay, we have to get to the current project, which I'm amazed that there are still interviews from New Dimensions radio history that have not been digitized yet. Like there's still more in the treasure chest. And someone on your team was so great. Like this is not AI functioning. This is someone who actually found out that my channel was this kind of repository of James Hillman ideas. A lot of the people that I interview are Hillman scholars, and I did a whole celebration of the publication of his book Revisioning Psychology last year. So one of your team saw this and said, "Hey, we've got this program with James Hillman that Michael Toms recorded, but back in the 90s or early 2000s that has not never been digitized or released. If you would just tell your audience about this project that we're fundraising for is to digitize all this old material and create an archive." I said, "Look, I don't think I have a big enough reach just to kind of like post it on my Instagram or something. It's like, let me get Justine on here and we'll have a conversation and then she can talk about this legacy project." So, what have you got in store? What are you guys working on now?
Well, absolutely. I will say that these older programs going back to the 70s have been digitized. So it's not that they haven't been digitized, but they haven't been restored in a way that people can really research them and look them up and understand what is in the content.
Right.
We've always been very conscious of the fact that if something is on a tape somewhere and if it's not fully described, then it's not accessible. So we've always done some little descriptions. So the restoration project is going back to those programs, redoing the audio, upgrading the audio quality because there's technology that really helps with all of that. So that's done. Maybe doing some minor edits. Sometimes it's to close up the music used because sometimes our music in those older programs could go for 3 or 4 minutes. It would be long music, and so we're not doing that anymore. We're cutting that down, and then redescribing the program that not only has the long description, we call that the full description. Then we do a shortened description that is easily put on the internet. And then we do topics explored, which gives a whole list. Here are the topics in this program that were explored. Then we add tags. Here are some taglines. And here's an upgraded biography of this person and possibly a website. And even if they passed on, somebody might be maintaining a website on their personal information and contribution. So that's what the restoration project is all about. So it takes some hands-on to do that. That it takes an engineer, it takes someone like myself or someone else to actually re-describe the program. I have probably more than 200 or 300 programs that I'm the holdup because I haven't described them yet, and I've been looking for some help for these kinds of descriptions. But that's what that project is about, and we're looking for funding. We started a GoFundMe program, and I must say we're working with a marvelous young man when I say young man, he's probably in his early 50s, but for me, I'm 83, so that's a young man. And Remy Lazaro, who lives in Paris,
Oh, okay,
of
yeah, it
all
was Remy
places.
who reached out to me. Yeah.
Oh, has he reached out to you?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He's the one who let me know that this restoration project was underway and that I might be interested because we've got some James Hillman. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to talk to Justine. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
So he
That's great to know. Well, he's
he's doing a
just,
lot of legwork.
oh, he really is. It's so wonderful to work with him. He's definitely part of the team. I must say that there are now five of us, and Remy is one of them. And I just love working with him. And he, so he set up the GoFundMe program for us for this restoration project. And anybody who wants to know about it, they can go to our website, newdimensions.org, O-R-G, and find that GoFundMe link
Yeah, and
to
I'll
help
put a
out.
link. I'll put a link right in the description, so if people are listening or
Oh,
watching this, they can just click on it and go right there.
oh, fabulous. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So you've got hundreds of
Yeah.
of programs that you want to
Yeah.
refurbish, and I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think generally people understand how much work it takes just to create a usable, accessible archive. Like you said, it's listening to a program in real time, taking notes on what's been said, any of those tags or keywords that jump out to you, making notes of all those, and then inputting that and doing all the kind of, putting it up on a server somewhere. It's a lot of work.
Exactly. It is a lot of work.
So are you hoping at the end of this to have like a whole searchable archive that people can access in one place?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is our intention. And it's to create a legacy that these audio, let's say, the audio library of a changing of an age into the 21st century and to save it for into perpetuity so that people can access and as you say there is something about hearing someone's voice. I mean, you can read, and that's good. I'm not saying to put reading aside. Reading, keep reading, keep getting books, do it. But also added to that is the audit, audio information we receive. It's I would say, a somatic thing. It's a body receiving, it's the body receiving something beyond the page of written words.
Hmm.
It's very different, and it's enlivening, I find. And as you
Yeah.
say, if you, for me, if I listen to something, maybe I did the interview, or maybe I haven't heard it in a long time, and maybe I pull it up again and I'm listening again. Well, I'm listening from a new vantage point because I have changed since that interview was first recorded.
Hmm.
And I had an opinion at that point, or a life cycle at that point of listening, that my understanding then created. And then now I'm at a different point and I'm listening again. And as you say, something pops and says,
Hmm.
oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought of that in a long time. And I haven't thought of it that way in the context of the new me.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going for.
Yeah. Or in the case of someone like, well, two people I mentioned, James Hillman and Robert Bly, I may not have the requisite background in, let's say, Greek philosophy or something to pick up on some point that they're making. And then so if I've kind of continued my homework and then I re-listen to it, I'll be able to hear something in what they're saying with like new ears or within a context that I didn't have before. And so, yeah, so many of these conversations to me are like evergreen. And, you know, just Michael's voice is like kind of like comfort food for
Hmm.
me. When
Yes.
I hear him talking to people, he's just got such a relaxed, natural, humble way of conducting an interview that I just kind of like, ah, these were different times where people allowed space, where he was, being spontaneous. And it's just like, it's a place of comfort for me as someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, you know? It takes me back to a different time. And I think I like to try to do this project in that same spirit, you know?
And I think you do. My intuition is telling me to pull a picture off my wall, and I want to show it to you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, this is a picture of Michael, and I hope you can see it.
Oh my God, surrounded by books.
And I don't know if you can see the smile on his face.
Oh yeah, he looks happy. He's in his happy place right there.
He is so happy in his cave of books and papers. And that's what his desk looks like. I mean, it was always a mess. He could
That's a
never,
Gemini.
yeah, I mean, he worked in what others might say is total chaos. But he is so happy in his cave of books. And so that picture of him just sits on my wall and reminds me of not only Michael and his wonderful energy and his beautiful voice, as you say,
Yeah.
which really had a calming effect, a beautiful voice and a way of interviewing that was just marvelous. So he continues to inform me and in some way. And I'm reminded, if I may say, you've mentioned Robert Bly, the poet, several times. And I remember being with Robert at some point at Unitarian Church. Again, it was Unitarian Church in San Francisco. And it was the first time I really understood how to be with poetry.
Mm.
And he was reading a poem of some sort, whatever it was. Maybe it was the wonderful poem about the moose. It might have been, I don't remember. But anyway, he read the poem, and I thought to myself, I remember thinking to myself, well, that's good. I guess that everybody else understands that poem but me, but I don't understand it. But it's a good poem, you know. And that's when Robert said, let me read that again. And then he repeated it. And then he would repeat certain lines. And then it was a different way of delving into poetry. It wasn't just reading it once and then it's gone, but it really took me to the depths and I got it.
Mm.
I understood and I got very, at that point, extremely excited about poetry and what it has to offer us today. And so sometimes I do an interview with a poet. Jane Hirschfield is one that I love, and others that I've done who write poetry, and I really appreciate what poetry is conveying to us in words, but mostly in images.
Mm.
The images that it
Image
draws
words.
up. Yes.
Yeah.
So when a good poem really takes us, and I love, of course, we didn't have the opportunity to interview Mary Oliver, but her
Mm.
poetry, and her poetry so often was couched in the natural world,
Yeah.
and it just blows my socks off and really helps me to get through the night.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Robert, he opened the door to poetry for me as well, and it was, yeah, a lot in his delivery. He put so much kind of heart and soul. It wasn't just reading poetry, it was reciting in like the old sense of it. And like you said, kind of repeating things because he really wanted you to hear the musicality of the language, or to really understand like the choice of the word, just like the kind of the perfect choice of word. And so he would just really emphasize it and repeat it. And yeah, it's kind of like teacher I needed to get into poetry, because otherwise, I don't know. I just thought, well, I don't really get it.
Robert Bly also changed my life in another way.
Hmm.
He did. It was an interview we did, and he talked about Jack and the Beanstalk,
Hmm.
that fairy tale or folk tale. And at that time, my son was living with us on in a kind of commune. We were living together. Well, we were in separate houses, but living together on the land in Mendocino County. And Robert was finally, he was in his early 20s and finally breaking away from me. And that was encouraged by the men in the group. And I was bereft. I was
Oh,
bereft.
not Robert Bly breaking away from you. Your
No,
son's
my
name's Robert.
son Robert, yeah.
Okay.
My son was also named is also named Robert, and he was breaking away
Hmm.
from his motherly ties. And Robert Bly did a program on Jack and the Beanstalk and what it really meant. And he points out when the mother threw the seeds out and the beanstalk started to grow, and that gave the son the permission to go on his adventure. And he actually used the term, well, there are many New Age mothers. He used kind of that term, New Age mothers that would have taken those seeds and put them in a jar because her son brought them home. And so she would put them up on the mantelpiece on an altar and say, oh, well, my son brought them home, so I'm going to revere these on the altar as a present from my son.
Hmm.
And nothing happens then. But
Right.
the mother was irate. You what? And you can imagine Robert Bly in his voice saying, you did what? You brought only seeds from selling the cow. And she tosses them out the window. And that started him on his adventure. And Brian, that really helped me in that moment to release that tight tie that was holding my own Robert's back from
Hmm.
his adventure. And in fact, just a few weeks later, he left for Panama and signed on to be part of a crew of a small sailing ship to come back up to San Diego. And so it
Wow.
truly was his
What an adventure.
beanstalk. Yeah. So that was a real gift from Robert Bly to me personally.
Huh. Yeah, I love that story because Robert Bly, as you know, probably more known for his work with the men's movement in the 80s and 90s than he is for his own poetry, which just tells you about the state of poetry and literature in the US, right? Um, but exactly like what you talked about, that relationship between a mother and her son, because we no longer have rites of passage that ritualize the healthy separation of the mother and son. What often goes on, and I speak to mothers, especially single mothers with teenage boys, about this a lot. And it's one of the things that I learned not only from my own life, but which Robert helped me understand my own life and what went on between me and my mother when I was a teenager. But what will happen is that separation is only natural, and it can either happen unconsciously or consciously. And when it happens unconsciously, it's often very painful and destructive. The young man acting out towards his mother, the mother being resentful or being, too kind of clingy, holding on, holding him back, being too possessive. And it can cause just so much unnecessary pain and suffering for both, that of course then you're going to spend years in therapy trying to heal those wounds,
Right.
right? Or you could do it consciously. And I think, him telling that story is not just for men who need to kind of claim their life and set out on their own, but it's also for mothers who love their sons enough to throw the beans out the window.
Right.
And it's like, in a
And
way, giving the boy his life, to claim his life,
exactly. And
right?
and yeah,
To
I'm
face the
very
giants and the ogres and, everything that's outside of the comfort of the family home.
exactly, but rescue the golden eggs.
Yeah.
And I'm very appreciative to the men in that lived with us at that time on the side of a mountain in Hopland, California, called Duncan Springs, and that they did an all-night session with my son Robert, just the
Mm.
men, and that was that ritual that you're talking about that's needed. And when Robert came back from that ritual, he no longer called me mommy.
Yeah.
And I was bereft, just bereft. And then I listened to the Robert Bly interview that we did, and I was able to release Robert then and be grateful for his being with men who were conscious enough to see how they could be of help at this point in my son's life.
Well, yeah, they were listening to New Dimensions Radio. There are a bunch of conscious dudes out there in
Yeah,
Mendocino County, you know.
exactly. Maybe so. Yeah.
Um, there was another question before I made that joke. Hmm. Oh, yeah, so he no longer called you mummy. Maybe he called you mother or called you Justine, I don't know. But doesn't that transition, I mean, did you discover this for yourself? I've seen it with other women that actually they get kind of liberated from being only mother. And it can open up a whole new dimension in a woman's life where then she can become more than mummy.
Oh, good point. Good point. I don't remember exactly that for me, but I think it's definitely the potential of because the potential of being more than mother and being more integrated individual in my life because I was having so many other experiences that did encourage
Mm.
that me to be all that I could possibly be in the world. I mean, it was constantly coming at me, but it took years. He
So
did
much
he
consciousness and transformation coming at me. It's like, you ever want to just take a
const
vacation and just be like
yeah
an
yeah
ignoramus
right
again
and
for a
just say
while?
enough,
Enough
which
consciousness.
reminds me, when I say enough, it always reminds me of one of my favorite goddesses, and she's the Egyptian goddess Sekhmet,
Mm.
who says, enough is enough.
Mm.
And she goes out to destroy the culture because they're acting so bad in Egypt. And I think that there is that wonderful aspect that many of us are feeling right now culturally, like, hey, enough is enough. And let me then give my gift that I'm here to give, my wisdom that I'm here to inhabit into the culture, no matter how small it might be, is
Mm.
is part of what we're all about right now, is to get off the grandstand, get into the playing field, and give our contribution because enough is enough, and to know that we are enough, however we are, whatever we have to give, it is enough. And together we're those imaginal cells, like we are talking about earlier, coming together and contributing. And that's what's going to change things for the better.
Mm. I've been feeling that so strongly that that message of enough is enough comes from a different aspect of the Great Mother, like the crone, the Kali destroyer, like that kind of that strong, darker feminine. I really feel like that's so needed. And I think it's kind of just bubbling, or maybe coming up in some places, like on the No King's Day rallies. It's often led by, I think, older women. The pussy hat parades that happened in the first time, that I remember being a lot of older women, crocheting those hats and things like that. And I really feel like that's the place of like the crone at this juncture point in our civilization, is to come out and say enough is enough. So I'm always looking toward the silver-haired wise women who have had enough and have a voice. Starhawk's one that just immediately jumps to mind. I mean, she's still active out there writing and speaking her
Even
mind.
Jane Fonda is still out there active.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
I'm
so
just
great.
reminded, Brian, when you say Kali and the dark goddess, if listeners don't feel like the dark goddess has any power, I have a story that she definitely has power. And that's my women's group, who is I've been part of for 45 years.
Mhm.
And one time we were meeting in and we were all embodying different goddesses. And one of the members was embodying the goddess Kali. I embodied Sekhmet, and other goddesses were represented. And the after the circle ended, for some reason, we dispersed without actually formally closing the circle. I mean,
Mm.
we always usually dismissed the entities that we had called in and did a formal ending of the circle. But this time we didn't. And the woman who
You said Kali
embodied
home?
Kali absolutely took her home, and Kali burned down her altar in her living room.
Wow. For real.
For real.
Wow.
For real. And some years later, I was in Ashland and talking to Jean Houston, and I told her this story, and Jean said, "Oh, she got really angry in a moment." She said, "Oh my God, you still have not dismissed Kali from that circle. You need to go outside right now and dismiss her. Absolutely, and let her energy go." And so I had to go out and do this ritual to Kali. And so I'm just saying that because that energy is, I started to use the word real, but it's more than real. It is an energy that is extant in the universe, in our daily lives. It is there and it is real.
Mm.
So don't dismiss the dark goddess as just some sort of mythological or myth or fairy tale thing. It's real.
Yeah. Yeah. They're figures and they're stories that point to forces of nature, aspects of reality, and the stories and the mythological figures help us to relate to that aspect of the cosmos. Like Carl Jung said, or had written above that inscription above his door, called or not called, the gods will be here, you know? And so, like, just like with the rites of passage, we can either do it consciously or unconsciously. And,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and I think that's one of the things that New Dimensions has contributed to over the years, is just more awareness of all these different perspectives on reality, whether they're physicists, mythologists, psychologists, poets, storytellers. And we were saying this before we started recording, but like in times like this, we need the kind of like multifaceted perspective on the world, because we know what happens when people are looking at the world through one lens. You can't trust that that lens is allowing you to see things clearly. We got to be looking at it from all kinds of different angles. We got to have a chorus of voices chiming in. And I really think that's one of the things that the internet can can help is to not only to seed these different ideas and perspectives out into the world at large, but also to bring those of us together who are these little imaginal cells working in our own community and our own neck of the woods to help connect us and to diversify our voices, to amplify the collective voice. So I think this project that you're undergoing with New Dimensions is really worthy, and future generations are going to need this timeless wisdom just as much as we do right here and now. And I mean, if we can apply enough of it to make sure that there is a future for those generations, right?
Precisely. And I just wrote down chorus of voices. I love that. We do need this chorus of voices. All of us, our voices matter.
Yeah, like you said, the more the merrier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Justine, this has been so great. I'm glad I followed my intuition, that daimonic push to reach out and say, just come on and let's have a conversation. I just had a feeling that you'd be just a good collaborator in conversation because you've been doing it for so long, and you guys have been doing it well for a long time.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. It's been my honor and privilege to be with you today. You've been marvelous. You've really been such a great receiver of anything that I've said, and I've enjoyed everything that you have contributed. This has been a dynamic conversation. I loved it. I loved it. And you keep doing what you're doing. You're just doing great, and your voice matters. You're part of the major chorus.
Yeah, bless you. Well, we'll talk to you down the road, and let me
Okay.
know if I can help out in any other way.
Thank you so much.
This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, please visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness.